buy the book button to get your own copy of Aurora Burning, and we'll order it for you and ship it to your home. We also have signed book plates from the authors, and we'll be sending those out to those who purchase the book. As you know, small businesses and independent bookstores are getting hit hard right now, but we're so thankful for loyal customers like you for keeping both our business and our spirits afloat. Now, tonight you can ask the authors a question by clicking Ask a Question, located at the bottom of your screen. You can also vote on your favorite questions, and at the end, we'll have time to go over some together. As always, please remember this is a creative, safe space, and we ask that folks be respectful of one another and any questions and comments. And don't worry about turning off your webcam or your mic for our event. You can see us, but we cannot see you. So feel empowered to stay in comfy clothes and enjoy. Now on to tonight's event. It is my pleasure to introduce Scott Reintgen, who will be leading our discussion with authors Amie Kaufman and Jay Kristoff. Scott has written Ashlord's, Saving Fable, and the Nixia trilogy. He is a former public school teacher who encourages and inspires his students to live victoriously. He lives in North Carolina, surviving mostly on cookie dough, his son Smiles, and the love of his wife, Katie. In just a moment, he's going to introduce internationally best-selling authors Amie Kaufman and Jay Kristoff, who wrote Aurora Burning, which comes out today as the sequel to Aurora Rising. In this action-packed series, we find Squad 312 still fighting to save the galaxy from almost certain disaster. I'm so excited to hear from Amie and Jay live from Australia tonight and to learn more about the second installment in the Aurora Cycle series. And now I will turn it over to Amie, Jay, and Scott. So in just a moment, they'll be with us. Here's Jay. And sorry about that. Oh, it's coming. Let me go ahead and take my video away. Here's Amie. We're keeping you on your toes. And now we have the three of you. Can you hear us?
All right.
Ready?
You hear me okay?
Yep. All right. And thank you.
How you doing?
You can get started.
All right. So first, thanks everyone for coming tonight. This is a really cool way to get more people from around the country, around the world, to kind of jump in and sort of get to listen in to two great authors. And so I'm going to quickly introduce our two wonderful authors tonight. Amie Kaufman and Jay Kristoff are the New York Times best-selling co-authors of the Illuminae Files. Amie has also co-written with Megan Spooner the Starbound and the Unearthed trilogies. Jay is the author of the Lifelike series, as well as the Nevernight Chronicles and the Lotus War series for adults. Collectively, they stand 12 foot 5 inches tall and live in Melbourne, Australia, with two long-suffering spouses, two rescue dogs, and a plentiful supply of caffeine. Very clutch. They met thanks to international taxation law and stuck together due to a shared love of blowing things up and breaking hearts. And we know that too well as their readers. Amie and Jay, welcome.
Hi, Scott. How you doing?
It is great to be here with you. Just to get to talk with other authors right now. I used to pretend that everyone else in the coffee shop was an author, and so now this is our way of communicating with each other, which I appreciate. I wanted to
exciting just to see another face right now. I'm not gonna lie.
Absolutely. And I know it's morning time for you all, so you look way fresher than I do, which is even better. But I wanted. It's very true. It's very true. So I wanted to start with an introduction. Obviously, I introduced you, but I want the people who are tuning in who might be familiar. I'm sure a lot of them are familiar with Squad 312 already, but for those who are not, give us a sense of when you're jumping into Aurora Rising, Aurora Burning, what can they expect to be getting out of this particular series?
Well, we like to pitch it as kind of Guardians of the Galaxy meets Six of Crows. Or if you're from a slightly different generation, then The Breakfast Club goes to Starfleet Academy. So, in short, it's the story of a bunch of misfits who end up being the ones that we need to save the galaxy. And, I mean, the tagline says a lot. They're not the heroes we wanted, they're just the ones we could find.
All right. Hey, Amie, this is Michelle here jumping on. I think we're having a little audio trouble maybe with your mic. So I just wanted to let you know I'm going to pause it, everyone, just for our guests. So Jay, if you want to speak to the next question, Amie, I'll sort it out with you. Thank you, everyone.
Sure.
Yeah, and I'll just add to that. Anyone who was trying to hear what Amie was saying, I think in terms of ensemble casts was a lot of what you were mentioning there. And this is one of my favorite ensemble casts, and that comes from someone who I loved Ocean's 11. Like these are some of my favorite movies, and this cast is just that lovable, perfect little group of misfits that you kind of slowly fall in love with all of them, which is maybe some of what you all do best, which is just making us fall for characters and then breaking our hearts when you take them away from us. So the second question is more general. It's kind of more to get us talking about why we're here talking in this capacity tonight, as opposed to we were planning to be in Fayetteville, North Carolina a couple months ago. So, very different. And so my first question is kind of COVID related. Our writing is shaped by politics. It's shaped by what we think. It's shaped by the world we live in, by the events we are going through. And so I was wondering, how is this time frame, what everyone else in the world is going through, what you're going through, how is it shaping your current approach as a writer? What kind of content you're putting out? How is this changing and impacting you as creators?
It's kind of strange because even though the world is in this state of massive upheaval, my everyday life hasn't changed all that much, because I used to just sit on my couch in front of a computer all day. And so I have this weird kind of disconnect where I'm talking to all my friends who are out, working day jobs and having to work from home and having the kids at home and have to deal with all this disruption. And my life kind of looks the same. I sit on my couch talking to imaginary people, giving them imaginary problems to make their imaginary lives more difficult. So in terms of my day-to-day operation, it's not all that different. It's kind of weird in that sense. The only real sense I get is when I walk down the corner every day to the coffee shop where I buy my caffeine hit, and you can't sit and eat there anymore. So for me, it's been this weird kind of disconnect. Because I work from home and work for myself already, I only get a sense of what is happening through the internet and through talking to friends. But I guess in terms of the work that I'm doing, I tend to lean quite dark anyway. Maybe it's got a little bit darker, but no, I feel like I'm in this weird kind of bubble in some sense. I don't know. How about you, Ames? We got your audio yet? Your comms? No,
Yeah.
I don't think so.
Can you hear me?
We're going to test it out.
All right.
Let's see.
Yeah, for me, there's a really strange disconnect. And that's true of a lot of creatives that I'm friends with. Because we work for ourselves already, because we tend to work in isolation already, we only get a sense of what's happening through talking to people who are out there in the real world. It's kind of odd.
All right. Do I have my audio back?
I think so. Yeah.
We're going to try it.
All right. I've been let out of jail, and we'll see how I go. We've been doing tech fixes behind the scenes. So yeah, Jay is right. I'm gesturing that way because on my screen he's that way. I don't know if I could be gesturing up or down for the rest of you.
Scott on mine, that's all good.
But the mechanics of the day-to-day don't really change because we were already working from home. But I know for me, certainly at the start, I was like everyone else. I think I couldn't stop refreshing the news. And, Jay sat there in saintly patience while I took him a month. I took a month to get my chapters back to him because I sat down every day and I tried and nothing happened. And not in that, I'm having self-doubt and I don't think it's a very good way. I was just not getting anywhere. And it was actually an author called Delilah Dawson who talked about on Twitter the idea that when things are really tough, instead of looking at your creative work as something that you have to go and do because it's your job, you can try looking at it as a place that you get to escape to. And once I started doing that, once I started sitting down every day and thinking, lucky me, for my job, I can justify the fact that I'm going to leave the world behind and go somewhere else for a little while, I suddenly started writing again. So I think, I know that at these events, we always have a lot of people who write watching. And I want to say to any of them who are having trouble creating right now, don't worry about it. You'll get it back. There's a pandemic on. It's not surprising if it's affecting you. But yeah, for us as full-time writers, Jay's right. We kind of get up every morning in our, I mean, if anything, probably I'm wearing more makeup than I anticipated wearing during a pandemic, and that's about it.
Right. And that's, I mean, it's interesting. Pretty similar. People kind of like, will be like, well, things must not have changed at all for you. I'm like, well, my 2-year-old is like definitely launching himself at me mid-paragraph a lot more these days. But otherwise, you're right. Pretty similar. I think one of the cool things to bring from that too is what you said, like if anyone's out there artistically struggling, like welcome to the club is very normal right now, but also of getting to escape for your day job and the kind of great invitation we get to extend today, like escape a little further with us, like jump on the book. And that's important work to be doing. So it gives us that sense of like, it's okay if it's not coming right now, but if it is, keep churning it out and bring it on because we need worlds to jump into, right?
We do. Yeah, I mean, our job right now is to stay home if we can, so may as well have books.
Right. So speaking of books and speaking of writing and collaboration, this is like one of my favorite questions to ask people because it's something that I do all the time. It's how I formed myself as a writer, almost like picking armor off of other writers and just trying like attaching it to myself and making it my own style. So you obviously directly collaborate. That's a very unique thing in our industry. It's not everyone does it. It's a really, we were talking before this, how it's a unique thing to find in someone else, someone that you can write with. But before that, we also collaborate with all the authors we read. And we kind of slowly pilfer things that other authors do and kind of make them our own. And so my question is, what is one thing, one technique or concept or style that you took from another author at some point and have slowly folded into who you are as a creator?
For me, it is William Gibson. He was kind of one of the first authors that I read taking note of the style in which he was doing things. And William Gibson is a big fan of sentence fragments, and so am I. But he changes the tempo of his sentence structure depending on the scene that he's writing. So if he's doing something expository or something that's a little more drama-based and intense, he will write broad sentences. And when he's writing action scenes, his sentences will sometimes be, 2-3 words long. So the pace, the tempo of the writing matches the pace and tempo of the scene. And I steal that shamelessly. I do that all the time. But yeah, he was one of the first writers, like I say, that I really took note of how he was doing the thing that he was doing as well as what he was doing. He's a great author.
Were you already, just to jump in there, were you already actively like figuring out this writer thing, or were you just a reader at that point and started to pick up on it?
Yeah, I was a reader at that point. I came to writing books when I was pretty old. Like I was 35 when I started writing my first novel. But I would go back and read some of the classics, I guess, the books that I loved when I wasn't thinking as a writer, and I would kind of examine the craft of what they were doing. So yeah, William Gibson was something that I kind of picked up subconsciously, I think. But when I went back and studied it, I realized how he was doing the thing. And yeah, like I say, shamelessly ripped it off.
It's the best, but what is it? The sincerest form of flattery, right?
Right, exactly.
Yeah. I think for me, I would point to Tamara Pierce, who writes fantasy. And I think I remember reading her books early on and, knowing that they were quite unlike anything that I had read before because, they're these fantastic series. The first one centered around a girl, and it's very real. There's no glamour in it. And I think a lot of books that I had read would never have talked about, how sweaty and gross she was getting. They certainly, they wouldn't have talked about sort of like the real grit of it. I hadn't seen that in the stuff that I was reading before that. And I certainly hadn't seen it around a girl. And I think those books both made me want to write and also influenced the way I write. They made me realize that my characters don't lose their mystique if I take you down into the dirt and the grime with them. They don't always have to be strong. It sort of made me realize that in those moments of vulnerability, in those moments of absolute humanity, and sometimes those gross moments, those are the moments when you as a reader feel really up close to that character. I mean, I could talk about this all day because this is what I'm writing my PhD on, but short answer, Tamara Pierce.
I love that though. That sounds like that, almost like that everyman Superman quality scale, right? Where we have to have that, like, we want to look up to characters, but we also want to feel like we are similar to them. So if you show them sweating, like we sweat, like it's not a thing we have never dealt with or whatever. So
Yeah.
that's awesome. Yeah. I just was curious. Yeah. Just from a perspective of like, I always say that, Ursula K. Le Guin taught me how to end chapters. She's exquisite at that. Her last lines of chapters are gorgeous. Pierce Brown taught me how to write action scenes. Like, I learned little bits of who I am from that. And the cool thing to me is that everyone listening and aspiring authors are going to kind of be taking little notes from y'all. Because y'all did something in the first chapter of Aurora Rising that I hadn't seen, that sort of like repeating sentence that you folded in and how you kind of linked them through. Oh, that was beautiful. I hadn't seen that. And I was like, hello. Let me find the right place for this at some point.
Also involves making a rod for your own back. I think we thought we had a great idea, didn't we? And then at some point you realize, oh no, now it has to keep going.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. You're pulling weight there. I like it. So other authors are great, but y'all have found each other, and it's wonderful. And the collaboration has brought forth some brilliant, brilliant books. And so I want to give you a chance to kind of brag on each other a little bit. Obviously, we don't have a version of the book that, as we go through, labels like which of you is writing which character all the time. We have no idea how that merger happens. And so one of the things I was curious about is, at this point, you probably know each other's styles really well. So what is a quality or something that you, like, if you were reading it, you'd be like, that's a J paragraph right there, or that is an Amie concept right there. What is one thing that stands out about the other person's writing that you recognize right away?
Poetry for me. Jay's writing is really lyrical and really beautiful. And I mean, there are a lot of reasons to co-author with someone, and a lot of them should be around, knowing that you'll enjoy working together and that, it'll be a good experience for both of you. But you're looking for someone who's writing that you love, and you're looking for someone whose writing does things that you can't do. And because I think it's funny, people often say, do we fight? And the answer is, like, we don't, because there are things about each other's writing that we both love. And why would you want to write with someone because of what you love about their writing and then try to beat it out of the story in favor of your own thing, So I think the stuff that Jay does, that I look at it and I'm like, that is amazing, and I should live to 100, I will never do it, is definitely the stuff that's just really, poetic and beautiful. And every so often I'll crank out a sentence of it and almost be like, and then look across at his latest bit. It's just like, all of it. Carry on, sir. Good. I'm glad you're here.
Yeah, we've never really had a fight at all. We've had one, I guess I would say, major disagreement, but even then it wasn't a fight. It wasn't like we were arguing with each other. We were, I guess you'd call it a debate. Like, we were both putting forward our ideas and the reasons why we wanted to do the thing, and we obviously had different ideas in mind. But yeah, it never felt like an argument to me. I guess that comes
like standing side by side, looking at a whiteboard. Trying to figure it out together.
Yeah, like as if we're trying to figure out a way through a forest together, and I'm saying we go left and you say we go right, but ultimately we're trying to get to the end of the forest together. So yeah, we've never really had a moment where we had a fight, which is I don't know whether we're weird in that way or whether
that's impressive. I'm pretty sure that's impressive. Yeah.
Work that way. But it comes back to what we were talking about before in the green room. Like, finding the right co-author is a lot like finding the right romantic partner in a sense. Like, if you choose badly, then every day is going to be miserable. If you choose well, then it could be the best decision that you ever made. So anyone out there who was thinking about co-authoring, choose wisely, I guess, would be the advice that we would give. In terms of something that I really admire about Amie's writing, it kind of comes back to what she was saying before about Tamara Pierce. Like, Amie has a really magical way of capturing humanity in moments that I often overlook. One of the great examples that I can list, I mean, we don't really talk about who writes who, but in Illuminae, there's a sequence where Katie's dad writes a goodbye note to all the kids as they're about to head off towards certain death. And it's this tiny moment. It's only like one page. It's this brief blip in the middle of this massive interstellar war. But it's this brief pause in which the humanity of all those characters gets brought to the forefront. The way they feel about each other gets highlighted. And I never used to do that. I don't think I really do it now. But that's something that, I learned how to show an enormous amount about how these characters feel in the tiny moments that they share with each other. Amy's just, I almost swore then. She's very, very good at it. And it's something that I try and emulate now. But like Amie was saying, you ideally, if you find a partner whose strengths highlight your weaknesses, then you're probably going to be a better writer as a result. The book will be better than anything that you could have made by yourself. But if you're paying attention, you'll learn those lessons as you go. And become a better writer in your own work. So that's the ideal circumstance anyway.
That's powerful.
I think we both have. Like, I think we've both cross-pollinated each other a lot.
Yeah,
and we've picked up a lot of each other's habits.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
I mean, this is, like, we're working on the 6th book that we've written together at the moment. So you can't help but pick up, hopefully, each other's good habits, not their bad habits. But but you can't help but have an influence over the person that you're working with. Because, we've written, Jesus, probably like close to 1 million words together now. So it's a lot of work.
That's something so I wasn't going to ask this because I'm sure you've addressed it on podcasts here and there, but now I'm like genuinely curious just about one piece of this. So you met and obviously like personalities clicked, and was that enough to be like, let's go write? Or did you like get the sample chapter kind of thing?
It was, because we actually have very different personalities. Like, I'm quite an outgoing extrovert, and Jay is a quiet introvert who, there is, when we tour together, usually there is always a point somewhere about the 2/3 mark, and all the extroverts who hang out with introverts will understand this, where I have to lean into him and go, I'm just checking. Are you mad at me? And he never is. It is 100% of the time. It is, I'm an introvert who has been dragged all over a continent, and I have simply run out of words. Like, I'm not getting the time that I need by myself. So we're quite different personalities, but I also make friends like an extrovert, which is also a little bit like a kindergartner, which is like I meet someone and say, oh, I think we're going to be great friends. I think we're friends now. And usually the introverts I choose are just so bowled over by it that they sort of end up surrendering. That's how we came to be here 8 years later.
Yeah. We decided to write together. Amie, it's a strange story, but Amie had a dream that we wrote a book together. We had been... We had become kind of mutual buddies because we're both baby authors. We didn't really know anyone else in Melbourne. The writing community in Melbourne is pretty small to begin with, but we were new, so we didn't have anyone else. We were like a breakfast club of 2, and we would get together every month and just talk shop. My editor keeps using this word, and I don't know what it means. Do you know what it means? Kind of stuff.
Right.
And after about 6 months of that, Amie came in and said, hey, I had a weird dream that we wrote a book together. She couldn't remember what the book was about, but she remembered that it was in email format. And that just kind of got us talking, and Illuminae was the result. So I guess if you're... We
kind of laughed, and then there was this moment afterwards where we were both like, but neither of us wanted to say it.
Yeah.
I don't know. I love that Jay always says he had like a George Costanza moment about it that made him say yes.
Yeah, because I am naturally introverted and generally don't get along with people. My first instinct was just say no, because also authoring was something that you did by yourself. Like, the idea of writing a book with someone else was kind of a weird idea. So instinctually I was like, oh, that's a odd suggestion. I'm not so sure. But I figured, what the hell, I'll give it a shot. The risk was that because we were friends, if it didn't work out, we might not be friends anymore. That was one of the things that we had to think about before we jumped into it, because you could end up hating each other. Like I say, if you choose badly, then the relationship is probably going to go badly and you won't like each other anymore. So that was something we had to think about pretty carefully. But I had one of those moments where I wanted to say no, but I said yes anyway. And, that one decision kind of changed my life entirely. So I guess take a lesson from George Costanza.
Yeah.
Just the introvert hesitation is like such a strong thing I can relate to.
Yeah.
It's unbelievable. So I've got one short question, one longer question, and then we're going to get to the questions. And just a reminder for everyone who's putting questions there, you can vote the ones that you really want to hear asked. We'll try to get to as many as we can. Another quick reminder is also please, please, please avoid spoilers for both of these books, just because new folks are coming to these. So just make sure you're not mentioning, who dies. We want, Jane and Amie to rip their hearts out the natural way. So yeah. Anyways, so short question is this: we've got this great ensemble cast characters. I'm sure different people, whoever reads this is going to have a different favorite character. But if you could pick one of those characters that you like, kind of have subtly snuck your personality into, or you most identify with, the character that is kind of you, who is that character in the squad?
In book one, for me, it was probably Kat.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of me and Kat's kind of abrasive personality. She's a pretty hard person to get along with. And that's me to a T. In the second book, it's probably Cal, I guess. Cal kind of goes through some internal struggles that I am familiar with as part of my background. I won't get too deep and meaningful, but some of Kat's struggles in the second book, Cal's struggles in the second book are kind of mirrored some of the struggles that I've had in my life. So yeah, there's a lot of me in him.
From your time as a space elf, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
As a sexy
Yeah,
space elf.
yeah, the time is hopeless. Yeah. Gosh, I mean, so there's a chunk of Ori in me, just because there's a bit of Hermione in both of us. There's a bit of, wanting to get the A and wanting to do the thing correctly, and wanting to excel even when it's probably not reasonable to be able to do that. But there's also a big chunk of Finn in me, which is partly because I think we both share the same sense of humor, and also because Finn is very deeply about family and very deeply about his connections to other people, and that's something that's very much in me.
Finn is my favorite. I don't want to play favorites, but Finn is my favorite.
You're not alone.
Yeah, don't let the others hear you say that. It'll be fine.
They're all fine. They're all great, but Finn, So my final question is just about Aurora burning. Without getting into spoilers, and before we get to other questions, give us a sense of what are we getting into, as what can the audience expect as they jump into a book they've been waiting for, right?
Hopefully. I mean, I remember months ago we were doing like a little preview with our Australian publisher, and they said, just give us a sentence about Aurora burning. And without even thinking, we just went, everything gets worse. And
yeah.
I mean, everything gets
it's
worse.
basically like the Empire Strikes Back of the series, I guess. Like it's the part where everything gets bigger. You learn that people aren't who you thought they were. You learn kind of dark secrets in everyone's back history. You learn the broader scale of the conflict and what's actually at stake here. And yeah, everything that can go wrong goes wrong. So we're knocking our characters down in this one, so we can hopefully build them up to get over the finish line in book 3. But it's I guess this book is the dark moment before the dawn, I guess is a good way to describe it. So everything that can go wrong does go wrong.
Right. And I think the first book we knew to take you seriously anyways from previous books, but I think this is the book where it's like you're lowering the boom so that as a reader, anything could happen. Literally anything could happen.
Yeah, and that's certainly something we worked really hard to signal in book 1, to make sure that readers understood that, anything could happen. Nobody is safe. That they don't, because I think that does, I mean, it stresses you out, but it also does make for a more exciting reading experience, because, if you know it's all going to end up fine, then, a little bit of the suspense sort of goes away, I think.
Yeah, so, there's a really cool television series done by Joss Whedon called Firefly, and they wrapped up the series with a feature film called Serenity. So spoilers, anyone who hasn't seen Serenity, but I'm going to talk about the ending now. So if you want to watch it and don't want to get spoiled, turn off. But there's a very famous character called Washburn, who in the last 20 minutes of the film, he just gets straight up murdered, like out of nowhere. He just bang, dead and gone. And it's this moment that kind of rocks you back on your heels, because he's the guy that everyone likes. He's the last guy you expect would just get whacked, and he just gets whacked. And I was listening to the director's commentary. Joss Whedon was talking about it. And he said, we put that moment in there to let you know that this is the final hour. And if Wash can die, then anyone can die. So it's a signal to the audience that we actually mean business here, and you should be afraid for these guys because some of them aren't going to get out of here alive. So that's kind of the aesthetic that we tried to bring to the end of the first book, just to let you know that we meant business.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, as authors, but also like the realistic, like what they're doing is incredibly dangerous. So
yeah, it's dangerous. Trying to save the galaxy. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and if you don't show that what they're doing is incredibly dangerous, then it sort of becomes like one of those high budget action movies where you're never genuinely scared at any point for the hero, because you know that because it's he always, is definitely going to come through and win the day.
Right.
And I mean, you see, like for instance, in say James Bond movies in recent years, they've tried to do stuff like killing off secondaries so that they can't kill Bond. You're not concerned that he's going to die. But they want you to be afraid, so they take it elsewhere. But as you're building a series, you really do want each book to become bigger and more epic. So you want, while people are reading Aurora Rising, for them to think, oh my goodness, everything that's happening here is as big and bad as it could possibly be. And then when you get to Aurora Burning, you sort of want them to look back and say, oh, my sweet summer child, you didn't know it at all. So book 3 is going to be fine, though. Don't worry. We're drafting it now. It's going really well.
Right. It will all go the direction of great hope, and all will work out, right?
Yeah, we just wrote a chapter where they were sitting around drinking tea and hugging their pillows. It was fine.
Saving the world is easy after the right people die. All right, I'm going to jump into the Q&A. So I'm going to do my best to kind of go quickly through them and get you as many as possible. So the first one with a lot of votes is from Israel. The question is, how did you manage creating 7 unique main characters? How did you keep them all unique and relevant? Even Zyla, who didn't have much POV time, but was still so dynamic.
So we actually did a lot more character building up front than we did for Illuminae. As when we were doing Illuminae, we were building that thing as we went. And, I mean, it worked. But this was a very different kind of book, because with Illuminae, we both took much more responsibility for individual parts. You could point to different characters in Illuminae and say, that's an Amie character, that's a Jay character. Whereas you really can't say that at all in this series. They might be, there are characters that we each originated, but if I write a chapter, I'm going to be writing every character's voice and jokes and attitudes in that chapter, which means I need to know every single one of those characters well, which means that we had to do a lot more work up front. So we sort of, I mean, Jay, you might want to talk about this, but we did profiles and stuff like that to get to know them.
Yeah, because in Illuminae, it took a long while for a lot of the characters to be in the same space at the same time. They spent... spoilers, but Katie and Ezra spend the entire book separated, and they're very rarely bouncing off other characters. So we had that benefit of isolation. We could figure out who everyone was by themselves before we had to figure out who they were for other people. But in Aurora, I think 5 of the main characters are in the same room in chapter 3. So we really needed to know who was who and what was what before we started writing. So yeah, we basically wrote these big kind of D&D character sheet background things where we laid out who they were, what they looked like, where they came from, what they looked like to the world, what their deep dark secret was, what the thing they want most is, what the thing is they don't want anyone else to find out is, and just kind of broke every character down. And then we did like a kind of a free-form role-playing session where we just kind of threw these characters into a room together and we just free-form wrote dialogue to see how they would all kind of bounce off each other. And that was to give each other an idea of how the characters that we were stewards of would talk and act and think and whatever. But in terms of making them all unique, I guess, we gave them all a deep dark secret. We gave them all something that they didn't want the other people in the group to know. We gave them all a driving goal and made them different from each other. We gave them all a superficial personality trait that no one else had. Zila is very quiet. Finn is sarcastic. Cal is brooding. Tyler is gregarious. You know what I mean? So we tried to build them in their bones as differently as they could be. So when we put them into the same room together, those differences would kind of highlight and complement each other. So yeah, it took a lot more work up front on this one because you got seven main characters. It can be quite difficult, and if you're not careful, then some of those voices can start to bleed into each other. One of the things that I do when I'm about to write a POV that I haven't written for a little while is I'll go back and read, 3 or 4 chapters in that POV before I start writing again to kind of put myself back into the voice and the mindset of that character. Because otherwise, if you're not careful, then character B can start to bleed into character D. So, yeah, it's important to kind of maintain those boundaries.
Yeah, so it's not just about their turns of phrase. It really is about their mindset. Because if all you do is give them the superficial trait, if all you do is say, well, that one's sarcastic and that one's quiet, they become quite cookie cutter. And the thing is, they're going to need to act out of character. The sarcastic one, Finn, is going to need to have sort of sweet or tender moments. And Zila, the quiet one, is going to need to have moments when she speaks. So if you don't want it to just be like, well, hang on, you're not acting like you at all, then you need to build something much, much deeper. And I think, it's like the old iceberg. The reader might not see all of it, but we need to know it's there because it's all driving a consistent set of behaviors for that character. And one thing that was on that character sheet for anyone who's thinking of trying this that I found incredibly useful was we also wrote down what's their hot button? How do you set them off? How do you make this person angry or make them react rashly? And we then, of course, used just all of those.
They were pretty in depth. Like, I think there were 4 or 5 pages each. Like we kind of broke everyone down as deep as we could.
I like the mention of the iceberg method too, because you've got, I think 2 of the bigger mistakes you see is like shoving way too much of the character on the page that's not necessary, or the author really not knowing what's underneath. And so we get this sort of shallower character. And so to have that avoided through this and that's interesting. I like the freeform sort of style too of trying them out in scenes ahead of time. I've never heard of that. That's pretty clever. And then you all are very clever. So the next question is from Christy. If you had to switch places with any of your characters for a day, who would it be and why?
Wow, no. None of our characters have a very good time.
No.
This course is literally me trying to think of anyone who has a good time at any point.
Maybe just who do you want to be for, like, exist as for a brief time in spite of what you're getting shot at and all that?
I don't want to be any of them. None of them are having
very telling that you don't have an answer.
No, I feel like maybe I just want to be like a little secondary character who's like off to the side watching the action thinking, oh, I'm glad that's not me.
Yeah, like the guy who runs the pub on the corner that they go to for a drink or something. I don't think I would want to be any of my main characters because I would know that, there'd be a part of you that knows the person who controls your fate and the world in which you live is a total cad. So I don't think I'd ever want to be any of my main characters. That's probably a horrible thing to say.
No, you know what?
Very direction.
We'll jump into Aurora Rising and we'll be patrons in the bar that they go to. In that bar scene, there's a blue woman who's playing a very highly complex version of pool that involves a lot of rocks, and she's the diva out of the Fifth Element, making a little cameo. There are a lot of cameos in this book. So we'll be playing pool safely in the bar while everything else.
Playing space pool in the bar in Aurora Rising.
That is the correct
bar fight, but it happens over there, and we don't get involved, and then they just leave. And we go about our day.
Of course, later they do add gravity to the entire station, but we'll be fine.
That's true. That's true.
So everyone dies. How would the squad survive? This is from Megan. How would the squad survive quarantine or stay at home? Who would lose their mind first, and who would eat all the snacks?
That's a really good question. I feel like everyone else would lose their mind because, I'm assuming they're together, quarantined somewhere, and I feel like Finn would be modifying the toaster in under 12 hours and, messing with everything in the house. And shortly thereafter, everybody else would go quietly crazy. But I feel like Scarlett would, start a TikTok account and go viral.
Yeah, she'd probably deal with it the least well. She's the most outgoing. She's a super extrovert, so being stuck with the same people for months on end would probably drive her a little bit crazy. And she and her brother would drive each other crazy. I think Scarlett would be the first one to crack, to be honest. Zila would be totally fine with it. I think Cal would probably be totally fine with it. Finn would find some amusing way to entertain himself. Yeah, my pick is Scarlet. She would lose her mind.
I just see Cal whispering Beshmai into like as he like helps someone into their mask. I won't say who, but yeah.
Yeah, sure. I mean that. Yeah, they could
a whisper as he's like fitting the ears. And anyway, what's the next question? Let's move on from that. I guess you've answered. I think you answered this. Is each character primarily written by only one of you? Would we be surprised to learn which author writes which character? But it sounded like you both are kind of merging to some degree on this one, or no?
Yeah, I mean, we both originated characters because someone has to. So we sort of divided them up that way. Mm-hmm. And we are both sort of, I guess, the primary author of chapters from certain characters' points of view, although we don't say who because we like to torture people. And we're just enjoying how curious everyone is. But the other reason we don't say why is because, you know, as I was saying before, when either one of us writes a chapter, we write lines from everybody in that chapter. So we really do both own them. And, you know, that line or that moment from that particular character might have come from either of us because it might be in a chapter that either one of us wrote, and we also really heavily edit each other's chapters. So it might be something that one of us inserted into the other one. So it's so collaborative that you honestly can't tell where one person's stuff begins and the other person's stuff ends.
Yeah, we I guess you'd say we're like caretakers of 3 of the 6 and like kind of final arbiters if there's ever any confusion about what someone might say or do. But yeah, the lines are super blurry on this one. And the author in APOV can change from line to line, honestly. So yeah, the lines are super blurry. I mean, we do like to torture you guys, but in terms of who writes who, it's honestly both of us. So
yeah, that must be. I mean, you spoke about this at length already, but trusting someone to edit your lines is where I think that's really humbling. That'd be hard to do, I'd imagine.
Oh, I love it.
Yeah.
Well, it's just like I can send a chapter over to Jay and be like, the problem is here. And but also fix it. It's great.
And you can always say no. Like if you don't agree with a particular change, then there's not going to be any hard feelings if you just reject it. But yeah, it's like we were saying before, we're both at the edge of a forest and we both want to get to the other side of the forest. So whatever path we choose to get there, all that matters is that we get to the other side, and the book is the best book it could be. So yeah, I mean, I guess that comes back to, again, kind of choosing the right person to work with as well. Some people just might not like working that way, and that's totally fine, but it seems to work for us. So
yeah, people ask that about, I get that question about my editor. They're like, well, don't you ever just like, isn't it hard to accept advice? I'm like, look, I can get a book to like right here, and if my editor is helping me, I get it over here. Why would I ever want to put that version on the shelf? It's not a good version compared to the other one.
You can always say no if there's something that you disagree with. Then you can say no. Sorry, editor person, I'm going to stick my gun to it.
Sorry, that was the delivery guy, and that was the dog throwing all 70 pounds of himself off the couch to go investigate.
That's okay.
Yeah, I mean, I honestly, I love being able to, you know, if I feel like I've taken something as far as it can go and I haven't quite got it. I mean, sometimes I'll say to Jay, oh, is that even funny? And he'll be like, yes, it's funny. Stop trying to change things. And that's great. But sometimes he'll go, what you want to do is you're actually, it's gone for too long. Just like, you know, what if you cut those 2 lines and tighten it? And so on. I mean, I feel the same with getting editorial letters. I think I know a lot of people, yeah, they do seem to think, don't they, that we sort of, you know, want to fight our editors, or that, you know, when it comes back, we're like, by precious, how could you? I just feel relief when my editorial letter comes in. I love seeing it all pegged out. And I mean, I'm also lucky to work with incredibly talented editors. I suppose if I got a letter back that didn't seem to be about the book I wrote, then maybe I'd feel differently. But I don't know. I love it. I feel like that process of pulling away all the stuff that doesn't need to be there and seeing exactly what does need to be there is very liberating.
I've never gotten the dread, like the editorial letter when it comes in. That's like one of my favorite moments. So I've never quite understood the dread that comes with that. A lot of authors,
the book is going to be better as a result.
I love it. I'm like, get me started. A guy like almost stay up the night trying to figure out what to do with everything, kind of thing.
Yeah, it's like
every so often
I couldn't figure out that problem, but you have solved it for me. So it's all about the book becoming better and having someone who can show you the light that you otherwise wouldn't have found by yourself. Yeah, that's a great feeling.
Okay.
Yeah, and every so often I feel like, you see something that you're like, oh, because you know how much work it's going to be.
Mm-hmm.
But I always think to myself, I would rather hear that now than hear that after the book is published when I can't change it. So.
Yeah.
My favorite thing is my brother read an arc of Nixia, and he called me. He said, "So can you still make edits?" And I was like, "Oh gosh, whatever you're gonna tell me, please don't try to tell me it right now." So the next question is kind of hits on a lot of the same, like who's talking, like which POVs are writing. So we're gonna skip down to Frank's question. Do you ever have any qualms when it comes to time to kill off a character?
Oh, I mean, I feel like if we don't, then we're probably not doing our jobs very well. Like, I don't know how you would write feelings without having some of those feelings.
Mm-hmm.
I think so. I think if we were just like, I mean, I know, we like to be like, ha ha ha, we enjoy your suffering. And like, I mean, we do, but that's because we know that what we've written is working. That's what we're actually enjoying. And I think, we've put a lot of effort into getting to know the character and building the character up and so on. And so, I mean, of course we feel sad when they die, but that's the story.
Yeah, if we didn't feel sad, then we haven't done our jobs properly, I think. Because you do spend an incredible amount of time with these guys, and in some sense they do become real in your head. It sounds like something a crazy person says, but if you're doing your job right, your characters will start to speak and act of their own volition. And sometimes, for me, the best part of storytelling is when the characters of the book start doing things that you don't expect them to do, and take the story in a different direction that you didn't anticipate. Because if you're the author being surprised by what these characters are doing, then chances are your readers are going to be surprised too. So yeah, when you put one of them out to pasture, then yeah, it does feel sad. We don't ever do it frivolously, I guess. We don't ever do it without a reason or just for the shock value of it. It always has to serve a purpose in the story. It always has to drive the narrative forward.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, failing is part of life, and sometimes failing means dying. So yeah, we want you guys to feel afraid for the characters that you love. We want you to feel there's a chance they might not succeed at what they're doing, because without that fear, there's no dramatic tension. It's just like everything's going to be fine. The heroes are going to get to the end and get a medal and everyone will be happy. So yeah, part of taking away the thing that you love is making you afraid for everybody who stays behind.
I was at a San Diego Comic-Con panel, and Pierce Brown talked about one of the big deaths in his first book, Red Rising. He picked the name out of a hat just to illustrate how fate.
Sure.
Right, that's great.
And it's like one of the most oh gosh, it's like one of the worst deaths. Like everyone's so mad about that one. He said he's still mad about it because as soon as he picked the name out of that hat, he was like, oh, no, that ruins 8 subplots I have going on, kind of thing. So,
but it also does, I mean, but if he's feeling that way, then so is everyone else, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, I will say, for some reason, I don't know why, looking at Jay and looking at me, people do this, but they do tend to blame him for all of the deaths. And they see me as some kind of innocent bystander who's attempting with horror to prevent him from doing all of these things.
You don't wear enough black.
True.
So I'm trying to make sure we got a lot of questions about characters and things like that. I'm going to skip down a little bit. There's a question from Grace that says, Aurora Rising reminded me in the best way of older YA sci-fi books like the Lunar Chronicles, mostly because of the good balance of fun characters and moments, but also an engaging plot. What are some of the sci-fi books that inspired you two, or in particular this series?
Well, first of all, thank you, Grace. That is a great compliment, because that is a great series. I mean, it's funny, we were sort of inspired by a lot of media, not just by books for this one. This is because figuring out what to write together is sort of this weird thing of sort of literally making a list of all the stuff that I love and all the stuff that Jay loves, and where is the overlap between those two lists? Where are all of our, and I mean, the overlap is pretty big because we grew up loving the same things, but
yeah,
there are books that influence us, but there's also a lot of, there's TV, there's movies, there's a lot of stuff that went into this mix.
It was mostly TV and movies, I think, on this one rather than books. Like we're both massive Star Trek fans, like original Gene Roddenberry Star Trek and Next Generation Star Trek. So we tried to bring in that vision of a almost utopian future and that sense of hope that comes from OG Star Trek. We both love Red Dwarf, which is a BBC series. I don't think a lot of you guys got it in America. People tend to throw blank looks at us, but in England and Australia, if you were a nerd in the 80s and 90s, then you watched Red Dwarf. It's super funny. The first 3 or 4 seasons are just hilarious. So if you're looking for something really cool and sci-fi-ish, then you should check out Red Dwarf.
If you've got, say, a lot of time on your hands right now.
Yeah, if you're sitting around doing nothing perchance. What else? Like Battlestar Galactica, Babylon 5. Yeah, a lot of kind of epic sci-fi television and movies was the grounding for this rather than books. I can't think of a lot of books that kind of directly influenced the work, but I can name like half a dozen TV shows or movies that we took stuff from.
Yeah, agreed. And I think, and then, you can also go outside the space stuff, even just the stuff like Ocean's 11, where there's that sense of like fun in the heist. And I mean, that's the sort of stuff that we were watching and talking about and referencing when we were doing it. And I think insofar as books influenced us, it was more that we grew up reading science fiction and thought space was awesome and liked to set things in space. But there really weren't particular books we were looking at this time around.
No, the sci-fi that I read is really quite different to the sci-fi that I write, which is kind of odd when I think about it, but
Yeah, I don't mind. I mean, again, it's one of those things too. I think I try to say this a lot when I go into school visits too. I think the biggest reason I'm a writer is video games, not books necessarily.
Yeah, sure.
Like 100% my gateway into storytelling, because every quest you go on, it's like, you just have to collect 10 wolf pelts, but it's because this guy's like barn burned down and he like needs the wolf pelts now, and like there's always a story involved. So
what's your favorite video game of all time?
Oh, I'm very biased because mine connects so much with my 2 brothers growing up, and so the 2 biggest games for us, we were like a necessarily good and like almost competitive. We played in like Major League Gaming for Halo. Halo the original, which is like one of the best barometers for skill. Like it's one of those games where like your skill actually separates you pretty high. And then we were when I went to college and was away from them for the first time and kind of homesick, we played endless amounts of World of Warcraft. So
my god, I played so much WoW. Too much WoW.
The slash played when you can see how many hours you've logged and how many days.
So depressing.
Bad feature.
By the end,
What about you?
Yeah, I was over here being a word nerd playing like online RPGs that were all text-based, where you had to write everything yourself and tell the story yourself. Although I tell you what, I'm playing The Outer Worlds right now, and if you like our stuff, you would love The Outer Worlds. The graphics are beautiful and it's very funny, and the game doesn't penalize you for choosing the sassy answer, so that entertains me a lot.
Nice. Yeah, I played a lot of WoW as well. I played way too much WoW, actually. And I started writing books in my free time when I quit WoW. So in hindsight, quitting WoW was actually a really good decision.
It loosens up the schedule. If you don't have to make the raid that night.
Terrible.
I literally wrote a paper my sophomore year of how WoW was addictive, and like its addictive quality, and how it fit like some of this. Anyways, while I was playing it, which was great. I think we have time for one last question to close this out, and the question that I saw that kind of caught my eye, because I think some people will have already like been jumping in, will be a little mad at you in the coming days and weeks. So the question is, do you already know how this ends? The book 3. Do you know where the series goes?
I mean, broadly speaking.
Right.
Broadly speaking, yeah. We're kind of plotting and writing book 3 at the moment. We have a rough idea, but stories tend to change in the telling of them, and you often think of cooler ideas as you're writing them. So the analogy that I use is that we're driving towards a city on the horizon, and you can kind of see the city, and it's blurry and there's a bit of smoke, but you're driving in that particular direction. But anything could happen along the way, and the city might be slightly different up close. So we have a rough idea of where it's going, but Yeah.
What happened? I mean, I feel like that's particularly apt for us because usually when Jay and I are touring in the US, we always ask our publisher if we can drive rather than fly.
Yeah.
One, I mean, you try taking a guy who's 6'7" on a domestic plane every day. It's not a good experience.
I'm tall, but I'm not quite that tall.
Yeah, it's not fun.
It's no joke. And so, you know, and also like we like each other's company, so we'll tend to just get a car and, you know, I mean, we plotted huge chunks of books while we're driving around.
Yeah.
But remember that one time we had this GPS that came with the car that we ended up naming it Aiden after a character in our first series because it kept trying to kill us. At one point, it told us to drive onto a major freeway on the wrong side of the road.
Wrong way down the freeway, yeah.
Yeah. Another time, it literally took us to the edge of a river and told us to drive across. And ultimately, I figured out that there used to be a ferry there and there wasn't anymore. But this thing was just telling us to drive into the river.
Yeah, just didn't like us.
So, I mean, sometimes when Jay and I drive for the city on the horizon, you know, we have interesting experiences. Also, I'm navigating and, like, I'm pretty good at it, but I'm in another country. So.
I love it.
Yeah.
Thank you
The very
for.
first time we ever did it, our publicist was absolutely convinced that we were going to get very badly lost and kept being like, update me, update me, update me. So I Googled what towns were in the wrong direction and then did a Google image search on like signs for those towns and then started texting her signs that would have suggested we were driving like 200 miles in the wrong direction. And after that, she just washed her hands of us and left us alone. So that worked.
Yeah, that's Australian sense of humor for you.
Yeah.
That's fantastic. Thanks, y'all.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for those questions. That was fantastic. It was great to hear from everyone. And Amie, thank you for being a trooper earlier with the audio and just rolling with things. You never know what you'll get, right? So I do have one more question for all of you, actually. What are you currently reading?
I always read lots of things at once, but I'm just going to tell you about two. One is a book that comes out next week. It's called The Fascinators. It's by Andrew Eliopoulos. And it's so good. It's kind of like the Rainbow Rowell with a lot of magic, actual magic. And what Becky Albertalli the other day called Disaster Magicians, and I'm stealing that in it. It's just fantastic. I'm loving it. It's exactly the book I need to escape into right now. And it's out next week. So now is the perfect time, if you're watching this, to pre-order it so that it comes to your house. Think of how next week you is going to feel about current you when a book shows up. And the other book that I've just finished reading doesn't come out till later this year. But again, think about how future you is going to feel about it. It's called All These Monsters, and it's by Amie Tintera. And it's set in a present that is very close to our own, except that some years ago, these massive monsters appeared on Earth. I like to think of them as giant, like massive cockroaches, but I don't think that's actually what they look like. And our heroine is one of the teens who joins international monster hunting teams in order to try and take them down. And I read it in 2 sittings, couldn't put it down, only stopped in the middle of the night because I have a small child who will get me up early regardless. It's action-packed, and it's also a really deeply personal and quite serious story in amidst all of the action. And I just thought, I mean, Amie is one of my favorite authors, and I just thought it's the best thing she's written yet. So loved it, recommend it.
Cool.
I just finished this one, The Girl in the Stars by Mark Lawrence. That's his new one. It came out, I think it came out in real life 2 or 3 weeks ago. Mark's a great kind of, he doesn't like the title grimdark, but he's kind of dark fantasy author. Yeah. And I've been a fan of his for years, and the new series he just kicked off is really great. And I've just literally started last night this one, which is First Sister by Lyndon Lewis. It's not actually out yet. It comes out in, I'm bad at this. I think it's September. August? Sorry, Lyndon. Yeah, but it's super cool, super smart sci-fi, super queer if you're into that kind of thing. She's a great person and a really cool writer, so I'm looking forward to getting to the end of it. But yeah, check this one out.
I just finished Aurora Burning, which was fantastic. I highly suggest it. You might have heard of the authors. And then I'm about to kick off The Hanged Man by Katie Edwards, which is the best urban fantasy that I've read. It's just tight world building. It's phenomenal. Yeah, I can't say enough about the story. It's the second book, so the first one's The Last Son, but it's just one of the highest end world building. I'm trying to study it to figure out how to do what he's doing in there. He has a lot of cool techniques that I haven't seen before. So yeah.
Scott, you of all people do not need to study world building. Oh my goodness. I have read Ash Lords, my friend.
Well, Phoenix Horse Racing, that was always going to work. That was always going to work.
This is what I'm
I
saying.
remember you told me about that years ago.
Well, because I feel like, I mean, I'm just going to keep us going for a minute longer because I feel like this is the one thing that we haven't had a chance to talk about that I want to is Phoenix Horse Racing. Is that Scott's here being like, oh, and tell me more about how you do the amazing things that you do, as though he's not incredible himself. And Ash Lords blew me away. I mean, I feel like I don't even need to pitch it to the audience beyond it's got Phoenix Horse Racing, right?
Phoenix Horse Racing, horses that live for a day, die each night, burst into flames, become ashes, and the next day they are resurrected through alchemy to ride off again in this kind of 5 or 6 day race. It's fun. I've told people before that if it was the best idea I ever come up with in terms of world building, I won't be mad because
you should,
cool
right? Because I mean, yeah, well, it's the book that I cite when people talk about world building, because it's not just enough though to have that really cool idea. You've got to then create a world in which that idea doesn't seem bonkers, in which that idea actually, fits and is a natural part of it, and that idea has influenced the world around it, which is what you've done.
One day we will talk about all the failed ways I tried to make it work at first. And we'll go through the list. Yeah.
I would do an entire panel just on that, because boy, do we also have many stories. When is book 2 out?
Book 2 will come out in February. I have a new middle grade out in September, so turning them along.
Yeah.
What are they called? What are their names?
Escaping Ordinary, which is up on this shelf right here. Escaping Ordinary is out in September, and then Bloodsworn is the final book in that series. I'm just going duology for that one, so Bloodsworn comes out in February. Yeah.
All right, that's great to know. All right, well, thank you all of you for joining us tonight in this newer platform. We very much appreciate it. We're excited for all of your books, especially Aurora Burning, out today. And thank you, viewers, for joining us tonight. Your support's what's keeping us going, and we hope you'll continue to shop online and attend more digital events like this one. So remember, to get your copy of Aurora Burning, you can click that green button below. You can also shop our site online for any books by all of our 3 authors. And if you want to follow further PMP Crowdcast events, you can click that follow button on your screen in the top corner and check out our website for updated event listings. You can also follow our Children and Teens department on social media under @KidsAndProse. So that's all we have for this evening. Did any of you have any last words, or all good? Yeah.
No, just thanks for coming along tonight, guys. Thanks for the support that you give us in the books. We couldn't do this without you. We love you very much. We hope you enjoy it.
All right.
Thank you so much to Politics and Prose for having us, guys. Indie bookstores.
Happy reading, everybody.
Indie bookstores need you right now, so
Very excited to have you all this evening again, and thank you all for joining us, viewers, and hope to see you again soon. Then, bye, everyone.
Bye.